Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 84 of the Podcana podcast. That's right, we're back. We're not dead. We're still alive. And of course, we have Brendan back on, finally, by popular choice, coming off the back of the NA Championship, which was, I'm going to say it, I think it was my favorite Lorcana event to watch so far. Even being present within EU, like, sure, that was cool, but I thought the casting, obviously, was superb. The pure gameplay was superb. The narrative, the stories from watching these players, like, you know, Zan Saeed, Ed. So yeah, it was an absolutely phenomenal experience to watch. I can't even begin to imagine what it was like being there physically. But yeah, before we jump into headlines and break down all the details, I do have to give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the podcast, Heavy Play. Heavy Play make their incredible CURV card sleeve that have rounded corners at one end of the sleeve. Never again will you accidentally shuffle cards upside down into your deck. They also have their EquipMag system, which connects their Playmat, Deckbox, and Dicebox, so no more rolling up your Playmat and rushing to your next table. Easy magnetic connection system for easy transport around locals and tournaments. Be sure to use code PODCANA to save yourself 10% at checkout, and use our link down below in the video description. So, Brendan, initial thoughts coming off the back of this weekend?
Yeah. I mean, I have something to say just off what you said. So the level of play, which is, which I noticed immediately while casting, and I noticed a bigger difference from the level of play in a DLC like a DLC versus Nationals than I ever have in something like Flesh and Blood, where I've attended Pro Tours and World Championships, mostly because, I guess, sort of looking back on it, because in Flesh and Blood, it's a lot easier to qualify. People can just kind of buy their invites. The level of play at the North American Championships was so high, and it was so much more pleasant to cast. It's not often in a DLC that we get some sort of, I would say suboptimal play, but in the top 8 of Seattle, there was a particular Ruby Amethyst player that I was having to commentate multiple games on that I felt like was almost intentionally sequencing his draws, like his friends on the other side, his rabbit, at the end of his turn rather than the beginning, and I was like losing my mind. It was a top 8, but I just remember the entire time throughout NA Championships, like, the play was so good, and it was so enjoyable to watch, because I felt like we were getting, like, the full encapsulation of these decks, what they can do, and also the deck building just felt so intentional, right? Looking at the list, like, there was just a story behind how players came to that, and they were clearly teched for a hyper-competitive, just, like, almost sort of niche kind of tournament, right? There was only 128 players, and these players came super prepared. So it was probably my favorite tournament to cast. In terms of card games, like, maybe the Flesh and Blood First World Championship gets up there, because there was definitely a vibe going on. But in terms of play, production, and just enjoyability for watching as a caster, the North American Championships were my favorite so far. Also, the venue, fucking sick. Oh my god, it was so good. Best card game venue I've ever been to in my life. Like, they had water out. You could go get water in a cup, not sipping from a drinking fountain, in a cup. Also, the bathrooms, not disgusting. No lines.
That was huge actually for EU as well. Yeah, bathrooms were actually pristine. Which, Moyen, I don't know if you remember. Do you remember the bathrooms up in the Bologna DLC?
Don't remind me of Bologna.
They were really, really bad. But yeah,
great tournament, to be honest, and I was very impressed with the players, the level of play, and I also found it quite enjoyable to watch. I felt like the way it broke down in terms of day 1 metagame, day 2 conversion, and ultimately the matches we got to watch all the way to the finals, weaves a pretty good narrative, and I found it to be super interesting.
For sure. Moyen, what was your experience watching the event?
Well, I only got to watch like the top 8 of it, which I casted with Spessy on like an unofficial stream we did.
Yep.
Well, the play was alright. There was still a bunch of things I thought weren't.
You can tell the difference between me and Moyen. See, like, I'm on like the casual viewer level. Moyen's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're like on the level of, okay, yes, they drew first, but there were still some things I think could have been done better. But like, no, it still was for Lorcana high level play. I still think it very much shows that we're like in early stages, and I think the highest level, even at the highest level of play and the highest level of tournaments, we're nowhere close to the level that you see in maybe the other competing card games right now. Mm-hmm. But I think that's completely normal, because this was the end of, or this is like kind of the end of the first year, and we'll see that improve as things move on.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about Lorcana as a low variance game, and then maybe just a game that has potentially 2 low variants? Because we saw 2 DLC, so Disney Lorcana Championship champion make it to the top 16. I think even to the top 8. Yeah, so even into the top 8. There was an issue that kind of plagued Flesh and Blood. I mean, is both the reason you would play the game, but also the reason that most of the population in the world doesn't play the game, outside of exposure. It's just that it's a bit spiky, and the better player tends to win. And in Flesh and Blood, it kind of happens like every single time, unless you get a bad sort of pairing against like a hero that counters you. I find in Lorcana it's not as palpable. Like, you don't notice that low variance, but it does seem like the better players rise to the top very consistently. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just want to get your sort of first thoughts and where you're at in the game right now in terms of like a game that potentially doesn't have that level of variance that gives a player who might be worse a chance to do super well. I mean, they can kind of do well, but do super well, because Magic has that inherent variance system with the lands and the resources. We've sort of completely subverted that. And while the game is analogous to Magic and the systems are pretty similar, not having that variance lever of the resource system where there's these non-games has seemingly created a game where, yeah, I think that the variance is quite low and the better players kind of rise to the top.
Yeah, I think I would agree with it, and it's clear that we saw that, especially with, as you mentioned, some of the top performers consistently making, the day 2s and making it really, really deep into the tournament. Like someone I also want to give a huge shout out to, Zach Bivens. Absolutely
future worlds competitor Zach Bivens, by the way. Almost not, but
yeah, absolutely huge. Like the consistency that man has is absolutely crazy in terms of making the day 2s and stuff. And I think that it shows as well to certain extents. I think he has been unlucky at times in a lot of those day 2s where he hasn't gone as deep as maybe he would have liked to. But I think basically, yeah, I really do think with Lorcana you get out what you put into it for sure. And like I think with anyone, if you're practicing a lot more with this game and you're doing a lot of, like, I heard people doing, I've played hundreds and hundreds of games of Ruby Sapphire mirrors or Ruby Amethyst mirrors and stuff. And I mean, that really shows in certain matchups to me. Like, I'm very confident, and that also shows, I want to say, because we noticed that Zan and Ed brought the same color combinations that they won their previous tournaments with, right? So I do think there's very much this type of thing of, players like a certain type of archetype, something that they feel comfortable on. Like myself and Moyen and Frank mentioned, though, that does not mean that these players don't test other decks at certain stages and try to break the meta. But it's, for me, it's kind of nice to see certain players on certain ink color combinations, and they're known for that and they're performing quite strongly on that. Initially for yourself, Moy, like, it was kind of blue steel back in the day, but now I think you're nearly a jack of all trades, Moy. But I think most people would still know you for blue steel and maybe Ruby Sapphire too, But I think that's great. That's great in this game. What are your thoughts, Moy?
Yeah, so I think of course if you play better than your opponents, you make it more often than them. I think that's great. I don't think we're at the point in the game where the better player wins like all the time. I think at every big tournament you would see some great players having a bad tournament. It's not like they always make it. And then also I think it's a little bit easier to get an edge on the field if the field is a bit weaker. So I think it's maybe a bit easier to show consistency in America.
I knew that was good.
Oh,
This is classic Moyen. There's one other question I have for both of you regarding the game, and sort of a high level question. I find as more and more sets come out, and probably as these tournaments get more and more competitive, those ink combinations that aren't in the top 5, 6, 7, you could debatably even say like top 3, are feeling like hopelessly behind for me. When we look at some of those inks that they're not like complementary, right? So you could say like Sapphire, Amber, or something like that. I think as the game progresses on, we get more and more of a card pool. Those color combinations or those ink combinations, because of what those inks represent and the tools that they have and the identities they have where they don't cross over, as the power level's going up, they seem more and more hopeless to me. I know we had this conversation, I think like last time I was on or the time before that. But how do you guys feel about that as we go into set 7, 8, 9, 10? Do you agree with that? Do you think that's getting more and more narrow in terms of like the playable ink combinations at competitive events? And do you think it will get better or worse?
I think so far it's been very true for the last few sets that have released. We haven't, and I mean in this set, it's so funny to me because, you know, from the design standpoint, it's like, oh, we're pushing this archetype, like we're pushing Sapphire with anything because it has, when you ink, do X and stuff like this, but that's not really kind of pushing the archetype. So it, like, I think if sets were to kind of keep releasing the way they are, I would definitely agree with you, Brendan. And I think maybe for the most part they might still just be weaker over time. Like, I don't think suddenly, you know, next set we're gonna get BAM, even like, you know, Sapphire Emerald.
Sorry,
like,
can we get the soundbite from Moyen there? Moyen, can you do the BAM first?
yeah, go on. BAM. Yeah. I don't know if we're instantly gonna get, you know, like a super highly competitive Emerald Sapphire deck. And Emerald Sapphire, I mean, something again we mentioned with Frank and Moyen. You guys have tinkered with it. There's like some little bit of potential there, but there really does need to have, you know, the deck really has to have something else to really push it. And I don't know if 1 or 2 cards from the new set's going to do that. But it's also, that's also a very difficult question in my opinion, Brendan, because we literally have no idea what's coming in terms of, it could be completely new mechanics. We discussed, like, you know, there could be the potential to do I mean, a lot of people are theorizing for set 7 there's going to be like the dual color cards and stuff like that. Obviously we've no idea, but maybe that type of thing could support the other ink color combinations in the future. But yeah,
that would be dope.
Yeah,
the dual in lead up to Worlds. That would be.
Yeah, I want to touch on a deck if that's okay briefly, because it kind of relates to this conversation we're having, Brendan. Because after this weekend, we were memeing in the chat with each other a little bit earlier. A lot of people will probably be quite high on Blurple since 2 of them did make it into the top 16, and I know Moyen is still not a true believer yet, but I guess like that is an example of a deck though, right? That kind of what we're talking about, right? Like, is it slowly getting there, or is it just like kind of a, you know?
To be fair, there's a bunch of like tier 2, tier 3 decks that satisfy one condition, and that's why they're playable. Is that they're fucking Amethyst decks. It's like Amethyst anything is playable in my opinion, and Lorcana is a tier 2, tier 3 deck. And I think that's like the backbone of Blurple, is it just does the Amethyst thing better than other Amethyst decks, or at least like theoretically, that's kind of what they're going for. So I mean, I think that Blurple post this weekend, in retrospect, does look like a real deck, depending on what metagame might show up. He gives me the thing. I get the Moyen look, but it depends. It depends what's going to show up. And I think that if you were expecting a lot of Amethyst, like it could be a fine deck to play. It's not like bringing, again, to pick on this color combination, like Sapphire Amber, which is like legit unplayable.
Yeah, you corrected, like, I made that face, but it was before you finished your sentence when you said, for, you know, there's a meta game where Blurple would be a decent bring. I agree. It was more like, if you look back at both Continentals, I think for both of those deck spreads and meta games, it wasn't a good bring, where Red Blue was the most played deck, and then in an A, even second most played deck, Amber Steel. I think I wouldn't love to bring Blurple into that type of field, but if there's like an abundance of purple decks, less Amber Steel, less Emerald Steel, less Ruby Sapphire, there's meta games where Blurple can excel.
What do you guys think about Ruby Sapphire getting shit on in EU Continentals and then being 32% of NA? Like, did you guys expect that? Like, I thought that it was going to be the most played deck. I didn't think it was going to be almost the identical meta share to Europe, where it got absolutely destroyed. I know that there was a lot that happened between those events, and we kind of cycled back to a metagame where Ruby Sapphire could be the most played deck. But yeah, I mean, let's pass over to you, Moyen. What did you think?
I mean, I also expected it to be the most played decks again at Continentals. I think I don't think we have evidence to say that it got shit on, right? Because I don't think conversion rate is a good metric to use, and we don't know what was like the win rate of the deck overall in the tournament. And also, I think some of the French teams sabotaged Red Blue's win rate by playing like this ultra greedy mirror deck that maybe sacrificed a little bit too much in the other matchups. But nevertheless, because of that, I never thought Red Blue was suddenly in a bad spot. And on the opposite, I think because America didn't seem to like green purple as much as the Europeans did. That to me put red blue in a better spot than it was in Europe even.
What do you think about the Amber Steel deck, the more aggressive deck with Dwarven Mind, into something like Ruby Sapphire?
I think it loses less to red blue than the normal Steel Song, but like it's still slightly unfavored against it.
Oh, you think it's slightly unfavored? Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's probably only 12% Ruby Amethyst showed up, which is significantly less than Europe. Europe only had 7%, but then had like a crazy conversion rate to Ruby Amethyst. What are your thoughts on the Ruby Amethyst conversion and the ultimate win? I know Ed's list, it's like hard to... I would really hesitate to say Ruby Amethyst and then encapsulate all the RA decks that were brought to the tournament and then Ed's deck, because they're kind of like massively different.
Yeah.
Because,
go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at red purple, it didn't like at least it didn't convert very well. I think Ed was he the only red purple?
The only one that made it in. Yeah.
Yeah. So in general, I think maybe it was like in a somewhat mediocre position, but Ed really doubled down on wanting to beat red blue with the 4 Tremaine, no Medusa list. And just not even going for the Genie Wars, just playing Rabbit, which is much better in that matchup. And I think in part of the reason why I expect it to have worked out really well for them is also, I mean, I haven't looked through all of the red blue lists, but I have a feeling that a fair amount of the red blue list built their deck in a way where they even cut the last time. You know, we were already down to this one time, but to me, every time I wanted to cut it, I realized, okay, I don't think we can cut it because the red-purple matchup, suddenly they can actually outgrind us. And one time is all you need to really make that matchup playable. But when you saw the final, for example, it was a list with 3 Tamatoa and no Lucky Dime. I don't think it loses a best of 5 against that very often.
What about the is the 12 1-drops in the 4 libraries?
Yeah, I mean that's like that's honestly part of the same thought, right? The entire deck is kind of built in a way where you are willing to try to win the long game, and so the Tremaines help for that, the Rabbits instead of Genies help for that, but also the library is just a very, very high willpower, cheap, cost efficient location that also helps you draw. Very efficient and very annoying in these long games when the 1-drops get fit into these turns while also being moved to the location. So all of that goes in the same thought of I can win the long game. So if the red-blue deck is built so that it doesn't even want to play the long game with 0 dimes and less Tamatoas, I think all of that works perfectly for what Ed was trying to do. And if there was multiple decks like the second place red-blue deck, I think Ed could really capitalize on that.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, the one thing that really stood out to me in Ed's deck, and it makes sense, of course, as we break it down, was the no Mauis. Like, it surprised me so much that when I first looked at the list, I didn't even see that there was no 5-cost Mauis in it. I just, not really seen too many RA lists that were running that. But what do you think about that list, sort of extrapolating from that list, if you were to attend set championships? Should I net deck, Ed? Should I take the national...
so that's a very interesting question, and it's something that I think it might have been yourself or the other caster duo mentioned. But yeah, I would strongly suggest that if you are looking at Ed's deck and you're thinking about bringing it to your set championship, you definitely have to try and predict your local metagame well, because if you think there's going to be a lot of Ruby Sapphire, I think it could perform quite decently. But I don't think the deck is going to do particularly well against maybe a different field necessarily, if that makes sense, because it was so heavily teched to beat the Ruby Sapphire decks. And that being said, obviously Ed didn't just exclusively face Ruby Sapphire, so he beat other decks throughout the tournament. But there's a huge difference of how experienced Ed is on the deck and how much he's practiced, and obviously practiced against the other matchups as well, rather than, oh, I'm going to attend my local set champs, let me just pick up this winning list. And you're not going to be playing the same as Ed. nowhere near the same as Ed, you know what I mean? So that would be my recommendation, is try and predict your metagame a little bit, test the deck out. Obviously it's still basically Ruby Amethyst, but there's a few different things that you need to be considering for certain matchups and stuff. But yeah, that's what I would say if you're considering it, bringing for set champs for sure.
Yeah, it's also that most local metas, like the biggest disparity between local metas and these high stakes big tournaments is that usually there's less red blue in them and there's more of these mid-rangey decks that kind of just want to quest and do their thing. And this, so you have to adjust the deck for that. You can't just show up with 4 Tremaine in a local meta where there's like a lot less red blue.
What would you? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just had one other thing. We've had this discussed before, but like one big talking point about this, how to build these decks now that we get more and more cards, has always been how many counts to include of each of the cards. And the one thing that I guess for this meta game it might have worked out quite well, but in general I think we have too many good red cards in the colors of Ruby and Amethyst that I want to build a deck with almost exclusively 4-offs and just two 2-offs. I think the Mauis, for example, a card you mentioned, even if it's a meta where you expect Maui not to be great in, I think I would still love to see 1 or 2 copies of it and have the option to play for the Maui in the spots where you do envision the Maui becoming good. So I was surprised to see this many 4-offs.
Yeah, it's an interesting game because I find with the mulligan being so powerful that you can aggressively dig towards like some of these tech cards in game 2 or game 3, even if game 1 if you know what your opponent's on. And that's kind of how it's always been. You can have like 1-2 copies of this tech card that you need for specific situations. You can go so deep for it. What would you guys have played if you were attending the North American Championships?
I'll start because I know a lot of you guys would be like, "Oh God, what's he gonna say?" I think honestly, I learned a lot after EU champs. I would have played some variation of Purple Steel. It's the deck that I put the most practice into. It's the deck that I think could perform pretty well in the field. And ultimately, I'm also just annoyed at myself that I didn't end up bringing the deck I practiced with the most to the EU championships. Not to say like I just played Green Steel and that was still fine and I had fun, but I've been really enjoying Purple Steel lately, and particularly Zach's build has been really cool to see. And there's a lot of different things that you can do with that deck where, you know, like Zach, for example, was running, I can't remember how many copies of, you know, Along Came Zeus, but then other decks are kind of cutting the Zeus completely and opting to just go for, like, you know, Strength of Raging Fires because they're relying on having that wide board, and then, you know, that card's just way more versatile. To be able to take out something like a Genie, perhaps, than, you know, the unique ability of a Zeus. So I'd probably play Purple Steel just because that's kind of my play style and stuff like that. Moyen, if you were traveling over for the NA, I guess maybe like LCQs and main event would have been possibly a different list, but I'm assuming let's talk if you were in the main event, I suppose, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because at LCQ I don't think at Continentals I would have played red blue again.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was at an even better position. I think the main change from the list that I played in European Continentals would have been that I might have been lower on the Medusas. I've had 2 in my list, but the matchups where Medusa's best in is often Emerald Steel, and Emerald Steel was much less represented in America. In Europe, it was the 3rd most represented deck. So because of that, I think I would have made a few tweaks, but still played like a red-blue list that is like naturally doing well in the mirror. And by what I mean by that is like I wouldn't go as far as playing like Magdark Manas and that type of stuff, but I would have had the full 4 counts of like Maleficence, Tamatoas, maybe Great Stone Dragon there, still on a dime to be okay against red purple. But in LCQs, I don't think I would have played red blue. I would have played like either Amber Steel, Amethyst Steel, or Emerald Steel, and just have like a mid-range deck that can do better against a lesser representation of red blue, and also just get the edge from outplaying maybe some lesser opponents.
Yeah, that's kind of a pattern I've seen as well, where I feel like those are kind of the decks to bring for LCQs, the ones that have, like, I don't know, in my opinion, like more pop-off potential, you know, maybe more like really powerful starts in the form of like Diablo stuff or crazy Amber Steel Singer starts. And then for something like a main event, you go back to consistency and something like, you know, that you can as long as you prepare for the other matchups, you can kind of grind through it as well. And I think also that's why bringing Ruby Amethyst to main event as well is probably a decent pick for the same reason. What would you play, Brendan? Probably Ruby Amethyst,
I
right?
feel like you could predict the metagame relative, obviously not predict, but you can get pretty close if you utilize your sources of information and intelligence to predict the metagame of a Continentals. It's a small tournament, it's invite only, it's extremely hard to qualify for. Like, that's one thing. Predicting the meta of an LCQ is like, I don't know. I think it's basically impossible. So I would just bring the most fundamentally powerful thing that has the widest range. Where, if I was attending something like the Continentals, I would be very inclined to run a deck like Ed was running. And to speak towards set championships we talked about, I would not bring Ed's deck to set championships. 100%. No chance. Because I expect actually less blue in set championships, and I expect a lot more aggressive decks and mid-range decks, especially things like Emerald Steel, which was pretty low represented in this tournament. I think will be highly represented at your locals or something like that. And also probably Amethyst Steel, like a lot of these decks, you can't really call it Magro decks, but these more mid-rangey decks that, if you played any set championships, obviously it depends on your location, but tends to be set championships have an affinity for these kind of lists. So, for me, I would have looked at, and I'm guessing here, and it's kind of hard to guess without bias because Ed won the entire thing, but looking at the performance of Ruby Amethyst in the European Championships, I probably would have chose to play that deck. It's a deck that I like playing. I think it's powerful, and to Ruby Sapphire, if built a specific way. I might have been worried about things like Amber Steel and Emerald Steel. Probably I would have expected maybe a larger representation of Emerald Steel at the North American Championships. And I do think that the prediction that Amethyst Emerald would be low represented in the US, I think that's a good prediction. And I think that's reasonably expected. It's a deck that's just so much more popular in Europe for some reason. Maybe because Arthvax has a grip over that entire region. I don't know what it is. But yeah, Ruby Amethyst, or, I say Ruby Amethyst now, but if Moyen and I were attending the event and I was testing with Moyen, I'd probably end up on Ruby Sapphire. It's another deck that I have an affinity for. There's basically no chance I would play anything else. It's hard for me to say because I don't play card games like I used to, like in Flesh and Blood, where I would play literally whatever the best deck is, where now I'm not committed to playing decks that I enjoy, but I'll play a range of decks I enjoy. And then I probably won't go outside that range to play Emerald Steel or, what might be an Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro. Pretty unlikely I'd play a deck like that just out of enjoyability. But that's what it means to be old and be a casual,
Yeah. It's funny as well because another thing I want to mention that actually happened the same weekend as the Nationals. A much less prestigious little event that I went to last week, which was the Set 6 Influencer Set Championship. So I came top 4. I got top 4 in the end, which was hilarious because I went in with very, very little practice. I saw someone's Amber Emerald list on Twitter. So, this looks a bit spicy. So I kind of adjusted it, made my own version, and didn't expect to do, I was like, yeah, I'm not even going to make top, it's fine. Because I just think that Amber Emerald is really, 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 really bad in this meta currently, unfortunately. Please give us some more support cards in set 7. But it was funny because the 2 games I lost, the game I lost, rather, to stop me from getting the playmat, was against Alphos, and he was playing Blue Steel. And I also lost the Blue Steel in the Swiss, which is so funny because both of them were you're probably pretty favored into me, which overall, I wouldn't say pretty favored, but I could definitely win that matchup. But it was so funny because they were not expecting any Amber Emerald, maybe from me, but obviously not from anyone else. So throughout some of the games, they were I remember against Harlan specifically, it was turn 4, I had an Ursula, a John, he had 4 cards in hand. I literally go, sing Sudden Shield with Ursula, you've forgotten me, sing Sudden Shield with Prince John, and suddenly he has no hand. And it's just I forgot this is a thing, yeah. So, I don't know, yeah, just speaking about affinity for decks, I just wanted to test out some more stuff. Please nobody play Ukulele in any deck. I think it's a terrible, terrible, terrible card. But it was a fun event, and I won a Scar, which is nice. The Scar promos look really, really nice, by the way.
Just reminds me, I listened to a lot of Lorcana podcasts on my lead up to the tournament. And I listened to Alphos and Harlan's podcast.
Yeah, what did you think?
It's probably my favorite one because they didn't really mess around. Arthabax's was pretty good as well. Zan's I liked, but it was 20% of it. They kind of talk about random shit, which I'm saying that because we talk about random shit all the time.
Yeah.
And so me, like hyper trying to get information for the tournament was like, fuck. That one was really good for when Zan was breaking down like a lot of his thought process for the deck he was bringing. But ultimately, Harlan's and Alphos' pod was the most like value, like just straight value to my noggin. So I definitely crushed that before. I also watched Spessie's analysis, which is pretty good. I think Spessie and I kind of would have had a similar conclusion on the day 2 bracket that Ruby Amethyst looked actually pretty well positioned to win the entire tournament. And Spessie definitely gave me some insights, which helped me on the cast. So shout out to him. He wouldn't shut the fuck up about the 1-drop Maleficent in the purple steel deck.
Or red, blue, and B tier.
Yeah, my man. Yeah, I know. Yeah, my man's got some cooked. He's definitely got some bias selections on tiers for decks. But yeah, I just remembered that because you were talking about purple steel. But what do you think about 1-drop Maleficent? It's like literally lasered into my brain at this point because he won't stop talking about it.
Well, last I heard about it was
about 1-drop Maleficent.
Last I heard about it, Moyen, is the whole thing that you kept going on for, like, you firmly believed that in Purple Steel, you needed to play that card in order to beat Red Blue. But, and you still think that's true?
Yeah, no, it is true. I think if you don't play that card, Red Blue is not unfavored. Like, and I think it's completely surprising Zach made it through a Red Blue while being on the draws as Red Purple. They must have giga bricked for him to get through.
Yeah. Kawa, you made a post on Twitter, I think like this past week, you reposted. So there was another post on like LinkedIn or something.
Oh yeah, that popped off, bro. Yeah, it was so funny. Somebody replied to it, was like, bro, why are you like so deep into like the LinkedIn shenanigans? And I'm like,
that's for business.
Yeah, that's where I do my networking, you know. So, but yeah, good point to start on this topic. Lorcana digital client. And I know why this is on the forefront of Brendan's mind, because Brendan has been saying to me for the past few, like in between every little moment I spoke to him when he was casting, he was like, please bring back a digital client. I need it so badly, please. So, I mean, he's not wrong. And to be able to see that announcement is great. Somebody else replied to me actually saying that there was not an exact similar listing, but something quite similar to talking about kind of card effects and animations. So they could have been working on this maybe a little bit longer than we've even known about, but this is like the key thing. Okay, they are hiring for an exec producer. It says like, 10 plus years within the gaming industry, preferably card games type of stuff. So, I personally would love to see someone, I mean, it could be anybody, right? But like, I'd love to see someone maybe from like the Hearthstone team or someone that really, really, really knows what they've been doing. One of the Magic team. And that's also interesting because for a role like that, right, it's not just, okay, let's get like the most experienced person within the TCG industry. You need somebody that understands the games as well, right? So I think whoever this person is going to be, whoever gets this job is it's gonna be a big role. Like I'm talking yeah, like
that post give you hope. Was that like did it give you a good feeling?
Oh, it definitely gave me a good feeling. Yeah,
gave me a bad feeling. I'll tell you why. Not terrible, but the thing is, it's like I don't know.
Did you think it was closer?
I've heard rumors. Yeah, I mean, I've had people be like, "Hey, come into this back room behind this curtain with me. I'm gonna tell you this thing that nobody can tell, that nobody else can hear." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds great."
It's just baiting you, Brandon.
And I saw this post, and I was like, "Oh man, that's gonna be far out." So there's a couple things. Like one, it doesn't look like they're fully using like an agency to build this. So what they're building in their house, like that seems tough.
I don't know if that's exactly true. I saw something.
I don't think it's exactly true, but I was surprised when I saw them hiring for this role. Also thought they would have like maybe been doing this a lot earlier, considering on some of the timelines I heard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Lorcana community in general might be a bit biased from the Pavel experience to think that like, oh, they're hiring this person, then they're gonna deliver a product, and we're all gonna play. I think it's like it is gonna be like Pavel timelines times 1,000. You know, like I've never seen anybody ship as fast as that guy, so I don't think we're going to be anywhere close to like a digital.
I mean, I do agree, but like I've also seen a lot of the sentiment where very, very similar reactions to what you said, right? Where people are like, "Oh, well, it's going to be 5 years, like until this happens." No, you know what I mean? It's like the confirmation doesn't help because they thought it was coming sooner. But with any with this thing that they're trying to develop, I mean, we talk about Pavel because like what he has done for the community is absolutely amazing, but like. There is a huge, huge, huge difference between like a card game sim, which is what, you know, Pavel's Engine was, and what they want a full official digital client with polish, with everything in there.
Yeah.
So,
also, Disney is like raised. So just from the back
Disney,
end,
yeah, I say, like, if you think about, okay, any normal game and, you know, like things have to be done and stuff, Disney approval on top of anything is absolutely you can't even imagine. Like, they could be watching everything like a hawk, you know, all these
they
decisions.
have a high bar for quality, which I actually think is going to make it even harder. I've just noticed on, like, you know, working on the back end of some of these events, like Disney becoming more interested over 2024 as the game became way more successful. Like the sort of like the success metrics and the criteria we're trying to hit are just becoming, you know, higher and higher, and they're getting I don't know if they're getting stricter and stricter, but my assumption would be that Disney's sort of metrics for what this thing needs to look like and be before it gets released are going to be, you know, very high levels. So I see it being pretty far out. What I think should happen is I think that Pavel should move to, like, fucking wherever, put the middle finger up, put that pixel board back online.
Oh my
get
God.
a ladder, rank one, and just, like, let's. Dude, I miss it so much. Like, fuck.
Yeah, the grind has been fun. Oh, you know, I understand this time the UK content set gems was you know, kind of UK and Ireland only.
Yeah. Moyen wants to bring up. Oh no, he's bringing up the beef. Okay, Moyen has beef to share with everybody.
No, it's not beef, but you know, I think that's fine. I think it's expensive to fly everyone out.
Yeah.
But when I was doing some research, you know, I scrolled to ink decks. Look what's been played recently. Look through some lists. I see there was a content creator set gems in Germany for German content creators, and that's the first time I've heard of it. And
bro, you haven't done a podcast in 2 weeks. You don't exist.
Yeah, we quit the pod. They don't know who you are anymore.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that.
Yeah, that's that, I guess. Yeah.
Wait, what was it? What was it? I don't even know what this is. So there was like a German.
No, like the same one that, like, happens in the UK and Ireland. There was just, like, one in Germany, and Moyen didn't get invited. So
yeah, no one told me.
But yeah, I do want to say, like, huge props to the team to keep putting emphasis on these community-driven events, because like, it's really, really interesting when the company decides to run, you know, influencer events like this beforehand. Obviously, it's to build up hype and stuff for the, you know, for the set jams, for people to check out the decks. Oh, maybe I'll bring one of the decks that these content creators played, and I'll go to my local set jams and I'll sign up and I'll play. But I think what they've been able to do to host these for the past few sets is really, really, really great. I've looked at, like, there's other card games in the market right now. None of the other ones do this, and I do think that it's okay. I do want to speak a little bit, because I know when we posted it and everything, it kind of was the whole drama, the whole beef of, you know, NA versus EU. The EU events are happening for the content creators, and NA it's not. But, like, logistically, I think it's a lot easier to host these types of things within Europe, because there are smaller regions, right? Like, you've got, like, the French division of Ravensburger, the German division of Ravensburger. So it's a lot easier to gather 32 people within that region, whereas, like, could you imagine, like, it wouldn't be an American one, it would be like a Seattle content creator thing, a Los Angeles one, you know what I mean? So I think that's the toughest thing. Like, logistically, it just makes a lot more sense to do these smaller types of events. But one thing I would love to see more of on the American side is, do you guys remember back in like set 3, I think it was, like, the first lore cast and stuff, like, they had a few more, like, creators involved, and they did, like, a Discord call where they started, I think they had, like, Steve and they had some other people, and they revealed some cards. I don't know why they've stopped doing that. I think they've kind of replaced them with, like, the lore cast.
They had Liam on there, right?
Stuff. Yeah, they had Liam on, like, the main the very first lore cast. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that. And obviously, I mean, there's so many people that play Lorcana, and there's gonna be a lot of creators in the space as well. But I would like to see a lot more people highlighted. It's, like, a big reason why, you know, when we can as well. I really do like having guests on the podcast when we can, you know, highlighting the competitive nature. Like, we had LD, we had, obviously, with Frank and stuff like that. But even speaking about Alphos and Harlan, like, all of these people are doing a fantastic job. And even hearing you, Brendan, say, you know, you went to listen to their podcast when we weren't on. Like, it's great to hear that. It's great to know that there's other people.
I couldn't listen to my own fucking podcast because you guys stopped doing it.
Yeah.
But you stopped it before us.
Well, I don't know.
I would have been Podcana #1 fan right here. I would have queued that shit up.
I mean,
on my drive over.
if the thumbnail isn't your face, I don't know what we're doing wrong. 'Cause it's gonna get all the clicks. Let me tell you.
If we hadn't rescued
Brendan
from the woods, he wouldn't have made it in time for even the cast in NA.
Oh,
Oh,
actually,
okay.
wait, yeah. Tell that
Yeah,
story,
yeah.
Brendan. Tell that story. Yeah.
So there's part of the story that I didn't tell almost anybody, which is like, so I go to Dallas on Tuesday. I'm going to get a driver's license. I leave on Thursday. First of all, I get there on Monday night. I have some chicken salad, which my friend has picked up for us. I end up getting salmonella. So
Oh my god.
yeah, so I'm in the hospital like Tuesday, Wednesday, just like the worst throw up and just purging of my life. I get out, and then on Thursday, Texas gets snow, which Texas does not get snow. So everything shuts down Thursday. All my stuff
Wait,
gets canceled.
is that why you were cancelled? Was snow?
Yeah. So it's snow and ice, which I know you guys are probably like, what? No. So Texas gets a little snow, gets a little ice. It's like they literally just canceled my flight, and I booked through a third party. So they're like, yeah, you want to change your flight? How about $4,000? I was like,
Holy shit.
yeah, no. So they told me like Sunday, and then eventually just booked a new flight on Friday, and I got there and then drove up, and everything was okay. But yeah, it was looking pretty rough for a sec.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna have to. I thought we was gonna have to call Spessy and be like, we need a remote caster, Spessy. Brendan can't make it, buddy. Yeah.
I don't think they're ever gonna do remote again, to be honest. Like I think that the in person is just like and I think that's correct. You know, I think it just adds a level of professionalism that people want to see. But yeah, it was dude, I was so sick, to be honest, and I was still like nauseous like all weekend, and fuck, it messed me up. Anyway, I want to ask you guys like one question.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on Lorcanito, the online narrative? What is it?
Why is it so funny?
It's funny for me because I don't know. Okay, I'll tell you my opinion, and then Moyen can tell you his opinion, because I know Moyen uses it and plays on it, because it's like, what else can we actually use, right?
Yeah.
My honest opinion is, I don't think this is a hot take. I think it's a piece of trash. I think it is so
Yeah.
terribly bad. And yeah, I think people
Wait. Tell us how you really feel. No, I'm kidding.
People will flame me because they're like, oh, but like, you know, it allows us to play Lorcana, you know, accessibly and stuff like that, which, yeah, sure is great, but I don't know.
You know how it works, though. The more polish it has, the more likely it is to get taken down. So it's like an axis,
yeah, but that's
right?
the thing with me. I was spoiled by Pavel. Nothing will ever feel as good until, you know what I mean? Like, I refuse. It's in person for me, or honestly, I really enjoy playing in tabletop sim. I much prefer it. I think it's a really great way to practice.
I hate tabletop sim.
You hate
I played
tabletop
Flesh
sim?
and Blood on dude, I played it for years. Well, I don't know if you ever played with an European and an American, or an American and Australian, which is how I was playing.
Oh, Australia's
The
bad. I've done
lag,
that.
It's,
Yeah.
Oh, it's so bad and it's so clunky.
Oh, Moyen's done that before. Can we have a quick interjection? Moyen, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to have a little bit of tangent here. Moyen used to be a professional DC Dual Force gamer before the game was even out on Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah, we already knew the info on the cards. Then Willow created them on Tabletop Sim, and he didn't even open it publicly, and we just played us
just them two.
Broke the meta before the game launched.
So we had the creator beta, and Moyen and Willow are literally just metagaming us from the get-go. We're like, oh, I'll try this card, I'll try this deck. They're just like, yeah, Batman, Superman, best leaders. Like, yeah, we'll just keep winning. It was crazy. You went on some crazy streaks with that. So yeah,
it was like 95% win rate for days.
Moyen is a fiend for Tabletop Simulator, let me tell you.
Dude, we played Star Wars, I feel like, being Moyen for a day, and then we built this blue-red list, and then I swear I saw that same blue-red list topping tournaments like a month or two later.
Just that good.
Yeah, I mean, in playing, like getting to learn a new card game and figuring out like all the ins and outs of that card game and what cards are good in that card game, it's just incredibly fun for me.
Right into my veins, you know. It's just like,
yeah.
Have you guys looked at the League of Legends TCG?
Yeah, what are the thoughts? It's on Pixelborn, yeah?
No,
It's on
not
Tabletop
yet.
Sim.
It's not.
Oh, God.
It's being developed by Pavel at the moment. It's on Tabletop Sim. I played a lot of it. Oh, actually, what am I saying? Have I done it? I have them here. If I can show them.
So, I want to do a little bit of pushback on the game, which is just like, I'm sure a lot of other people thought this, but the reused art from League of Legends really turned me off. I know they didn't do that for the premium cards, but I thought initially the game aesthetically looked cheap.
Are you?
Like, how does it?
That's funny because everyone has said like, oh, isn't this just like One Piece card design? Or how the cards
They
actually
stopped
look?
doing that. They stopped doing the. You're saying that because of the way it looks. Yeah. So One Piece used to take screenshots from the manga, or not the manga, the anime.
Yeah, and they
cards
changed
look
that.
like-
Yeah.
They look like shit.
We also have the white border and this like.
Yeah, I mean
Moyen.
Moyen, like that looks kind of like a One Piece card, no?
I like
white
white
like
borders.
a One Piece card.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think white borders are completely fine.
Yeah, they don't get scuffed. Like, and I like white borders. Like, Flesh and Blood has this like weird supplementary project where they had white borders, and I would just like put those cards in my deck just to piss people off because people hate them. Magic players hate them.
I think Kawa hates them too.
I don't hate them. I feel it's very like old. Like I think Black Borders is much more modern and stuff, but that's just my opinion. All right, yeah, let's
on the
let's get back on
business here.
Yes, order business.
I'm serious about. I do want Pavel to move to some like country that doesn't have extradition. And to put Pixelborn back up.
Oh, okay, that's what you meant. I thought you were suggesting because I know a lot of people have been like, oh, their job is up. Everybody hire Pavel, But Pavel, he can't. I don't think this man can just up and like move. He's got a family and everything, right? Imagine he's like, yeah, all right, it's time. Goodbye, everybody, and just moves to the US and stuff like that. But I know a lot of people would love, and it's interesting to think. I'm sure. I mean, we've no idea, right? But if conversations were had, or if he's inquired and different things like that, but it's definitely interesting. I do want to move on just quickly, guys, and talk about the future. So, as Moyen mentioned, we're kind of nearing the end of this competitive season. It's basically just Worlds left. However, a big milestone for Lorcana is within 2025. Obviously, it's already released in China, and I believe next week it's going to be releasing in Japan officially. And my prediction is we have the DLC in Australia, which is going to happen, where it's publicly been announced that the 2 finalists of that are going to qualify to Worlds. That would put the total count of players for Worlds up from 26 to 28. So I reckon what's going to happen is we're going to have a DLC in Japan and a DLC in China. And I think the finalists from both of them are then going to also go qual to Worlds. I think we're going to have 32 players at Worlds. I think what's going to happen...
Round robin?
Well, 32. Well, I don't know. I don't know what the format is, but like what I'm saying is from a pure numbers perspective, right? Like I don't think it's going to be 28 players. I think it's going to be 32. So I think there's going to be a few more quals sprinkled out here and there. And I also think that, everyone's been crying out for this. Everyone thought it was going to happen at the NA Champs. We've been given no official date yet for Worlds. The closest thing we had was on an article when all of the news came out at D23. There was a news article that said it would be in March. But since then, I've heard, speaking to Ravensburger people who officially told me, there's been no official statement to actually say it's been March. Apparently that was just from the article. But this is the perception that everyone thinks, right? Oh, it's around March. So if it's not around March, like say it's around like May or summer, do you guys think that it's literally going to be okay? Say we have a few like APAC DLCs and then we have Worlds. Do you think they'd start the next season of competitive without finishing Worlds is my question. Because if that's the case, we could be waiting a while. And personally, as a competitive player, I don't want to have like a big dry spell of where we can't really compete. Like set champs fine are great, but like I'm eager to like, I want, new season of DLCs in May. I want to jump back into it,
I'm just not the guy to ask because I have Stockholm syndrome from Flesh and Blood, which was like, hey, World Championships next week, France. See you there. I'm like, fuck.
Oh, that was your info? Oh my god, a week before?
Dude, they would give us like no notice, and it was down to them not being able to book venues. So back in like 2022, around like that post-COVID era, the convention centers were all very high demand. So what happened was they would book a convention center, the convention center would cancel on them and book somebody else for like a higher rate. Like Flesh and Blood World Championship San Jose 2022, I believe, or maybe it's 2023, was in a tent.
Wow.
Because we got bought out by I think like Zoom or something, like bought our convention center out from under us. Yeah. So, but yeah, they would give us like no notice, and that was down to not being able to book venues. That is obviously not the case here because the World Championships are going to be in
Orlando,
Walt Disney World.
Yep. Correct. Moyen,
I think
I want to speak about something, sorry, really, really quickly, because I know you mentioned it to us a little bit earlier. And I've since watched a video. This is in relation to the DQing incidents that took place at the NA Champs. And Brendan, I'm like, it's actually funny because I was getting flashbacks of the story you always tell about with Flesh and Blood, where you're like, this guy's going so deep, he's so favored to win, and then the guy's like, no, he's DQ'd. But we like, I remember seeing on Twitter there was somebody who was on table 1. It was a red-blue player. And the tweet was basically like, oh, I got to table 1 and I just got DQ'd. And I watched this whole, he did like a 30-minute video on it. And I watched the whole thing. It was basically, he lost a Maui Shark. I think he said for the first 2 games, he did pile shuffling and he was counting and stuff. And then they went to lunch. And obviously that's where stuff happened. When the judges asked, okay, like, I think it was the deck check in round 4, right? Judges asked, where's your card? He says, I don't know. Where did you see it last, type of thing. He was pretty confident that in the previous round, he used that card to basically close out the game. So he was pretty confident that's where it was. So like, look back, check it. Didn't see it anywhere. The next round happens or whatever. I think basically because when they did the deck check, they gave him a game loss, but he had a 62 card deck. So I think for the 61, he was basically what happened though was the judges decided that shortly after he learned that the judges had his card for 2 rounds. So the judges had the card, they found the card, but when they asked him where did you have it last or where did you think, his answer was incorrect because it was like 2 rounds ago, and because of that, the judges says, well, you're lying to the judges because you didn't have it in this game. You lost it 2 games ago. You didn't lose it 1 game ago. So that's considered as lying to the judges. And he, like, I don't know this player at all, but apparently he, I think he qualified in Vegas, I want to say. He was top table. He was like very, very favored to make it in. Like, imagine you're in that position. I think he was basically, he 2-0'd 3 times, and then in game 1, he 1-0'd because the game went to time. So imagine you're like round 4, you're sitting there. I'd be feeling pretty confident, you know what I mean? And then that happens. So it's a pretty unfortunate situation. And I think people in the community were just saying, okay, was that a bit harsh for, is usually losing a card, it's a game loss, it's not exactly a DQ. But then if it was considered, oh, you're lying to the judge, it's a DQ, right?
Well, if he was strictly incorrect, right, where he was like, I mean, the intent of lying or not lying is so subjective, like the judges just decided. But if he was wrong and there wasn't like a reasonable open to interpretation, you're lying. I actually think it's one of the more fair DQs I've heard of. I've heard some pretty unfair DQs. For instance, Flesh and Blood World Championships in Barcelona, there's a player from Brazil, and because there's a player from Brazil, they're fucking hyping it up on the cast as like the first, non-European, non-North American player to potentially make it top 8 of Worlds. Gets to the feature match table, which is mic'd up, by the way. Opponent asks him something. He responds incorrectly. So it was some sort of collusion on the split, DQ'd on the spot. Mm-hmm. And he didn't initiate that. He just answered incorrectly. And he didn't answer in a bad way. He just answered in a way that, like, through the fine print of the rules, was just, like, not allowed, instantly DQ'd.
And was the person initiating it DQ'd also? Or?
No, because they asked it in the right way. They asked it in the right way. I don't remember the exact granularity of like how they asked it versus how he answered, but that was effectively what it came down to, is the opponent didn't get DQ'd because they asked it in like a very open-ended way. He answered it in a very non-open-ended way, which made him sort of the burden of collusion, which was, in my opinion, an unfair disqualification, where this is like, if you make it a legit mistake, and yeah, I mean, you have this like deck list error, and there was like when I say reasonable, like I don't really care if he lied or not, but if there's like a possibility it could be open to interpretation for lying, it sucks. I think that's a bad beat, but it's not a particularly. I didn't watch the video, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, and again, from what I said, context of what happened, I'm not going to remember the story the same way the guy said it. So if anybody's interested, go check out the video. I think his name is Dragon Johns or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So plus I haven't watched the video either, but even after watching the video, all we know is their perspective and their side of the story, and which leads me to 2 points of discussion that I want to talk about. One is, what do you guys think about basically DQs not being public information, in terms of the exact reason why they got DQ'd and how it happened? Because now everyone's speculating, but no one really knows, and all we can really listen to is what the guy that got DQ'd is telling us. And And the other one was like, which will be two big points, but the other one was kind of the inconsistency of rules between European continents and North American
Oh,
continents.
that's a big one.
Because from what I've heard, it was explicitly not allowed to split, which was allowed in Europe.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's a weird. That one, I saw that one on Twitter. That's a weird one. What was the first question again?
The first question was about like how we can really assess these DQs in situations with the information behind it kind of being like not available to the public.
Yeah, I don't know if there are games like Flesh and Blood is not like that. It's definitely not available to the public. I don't think that like whatever governing body, whether it's the judges or some sort of like the head judge, should be sort of liable to or like responsible to like explain it to a public that they have to go back and forth with. But maybe like if there was like a criteria of things you could be DQ'd for, like you would kind of get lumped into one, and maybe that part would be public, like something very vague. Because it is like, yeah, you're right. Like, we just have his version. We don't know what he was actually DQ'd for. Like, there's no... It's not like, because there could be cheating, decklist error, not showing up, or whatever reasons there could be.
Oh, that also happened, by the way. I was talking to, the Rat, Brian, who won... What did he win, Chicago? So I think he won his round one. And then I was messaging him the other day. I was like, oh, how did the tournament go? Because obviously I was like, oh, I hope your run wasn't too bad because you didn't make it into day 2. But obviously, you've still got the Worlds qual. And he was like, yeah, I was late to my game on game 2, so I dropped. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, I mean, he's like, that's not the whole context of the story. He was like, but the way he said it was like, I was barely late. But he's like, at the end of the day, I was still late. So he was like, I understand, whatever. He was given game loss or whatever. But there's there's always a few little funky things that happen at these tournaments. The one thing, Moyen, this is the most important question if you do remember, and Brendan, I'm curious if you know the answer to this. Moyen spent a good section of the last podcast talking about the catering and the food available at the European Championship. I don't know if you heard that story, but they basically like took food away from the players and then wouldn't let certain players in. So the whole running gag was like, you have to like stay in contention and stay in the tournament to actually be able to eat and drink. Yeah. So
that's how it should be, though. Food is for winners.
Yeah, okay, but so basically, I was sitting there eating because, and even like, I asked the judge if it's correct for me to sit here, if I'm allowed to eat there, and they said yes, and then another judge comes up and tells me, yeah, you're not allowed to eat here. And like, okay, okay, how come? Why not? And he's like, oh, are you in the top 4? So the top 4 would have still been allowed to eat, but anyone else wasn't. So that was kind of funny.
Yeah. Did you feel like you deserved to eat in that moment?
Yeah, I always feel like I deserve to eat.
Yes, that was funny. So yeah, any other major stories?
Oh yeah,
or stuff
one more
for
from me. I think that North American Championships, and probably you as well, should have more Swiss rounds. 7 is tight. Bubble, unfortunate. Like why are we doing 7? Like we could do more, and I think everybody would probably enjoy more.
Did they do the 7 based on the standard of like player count for Swiss? Is that why they did 7, or I'm not too sure?
Yeah, I think so. Like
that's probably why, right? Yeah.
Probably could have had more rounds though. I mean, it's like an invite-only tournament, and yeah, I mean.
Yeah, we probably could have, but I think while players usually always seen as better because they just want to play more and like have a better chance of confirming them that they're that they have a better chance because they're better than everyone else. But I think 14 games in a 100-player tournament, it's not like an unreasonable low amount of games to see who's better.
I think I would have liked to see more. Just because, like this big event, we got all these players coming in. They tried so hard to get here. Like, they kind of earned it. It's like, I think we could get more games out of it.
Were you present on the Friday, Brendan? Because I'm assuming, so this is funny. I'm assuming that because we heard no shenanigans about LTQs, everything went smoothly. Because that was obviously not the case in EU with all the whole crazy table numbering situations where, since PPG were there, I'm sure they saw that crap that went on and said, no, there's no way that's happening at our tournament. So
it's not there on Friday. I flew in on Friday. I flew into San Diego and then I drove up that night. But yeah, my big takeaway: Pixelborn gotta come back.
But like, don't you want to play now, Brendan? After like that weekend?
Yeah, like the thing is like, more biased now because of my lifestyle. I don't believe in the statement that I don't have time for something. I think that that's virtually just like a useless statement, right? You have things that you prioritize, right? So with what I'm prioritizing in my life right now, that leaves it to the very hard to find time or to prioritize time to play Lorcana, especially if I need to grab a physical deck, drive to a physical place in the fucking city, by the way, and then get there on time. This is with a, effectively a 9-to-5 in-office job, and then come back and, feel refreshed from that experience rather than drained. And right now, that is just not logistically possible. It's because I'm choosing to prioritize different things. Lorcana used to be a part of my everyday life, in between 20 minutes here, 30 minutes there. I'd queue up a game on Pixelborn, and I used to play the game all the time, and I liked that.
Yep, it's a big factor of like having the game in your kind of everyday life and at the forefront of your mind. I talked about this with somebody previously. I actually think I talked about this with somebody at the Set Champs event. It might have been another content creator. And yeah, like the difference of when we had Pavel's Engine, like people were streaming the game. So even if you weren't playing, if you were like on your lunch break or something, like you could still be saying, okay, yeah, they're playing this deck. And you're just a lot more engaged with the game, where now it does take a lot more time and a lot more energy to be engaged with the game because there's a lot more steps that come with that. So again, I'm really hoping that the client helps with that. When that's coming, obviously, who knows? But hopefully quite soon. So yeah, have you guys
remember Savige?
Oh, of course, yeah. Actually, fun fact, do you know what Savige was at last week?
What?
He was playtesting for the Wild.
Playtesting the League of Legends card game.
Now.
Yep.
Oh, I miss those days. Those were good days. We could wait for the client, or Pavel could just relaunch.
Oh, I thought you were about to say Lorcanito. Please, no.
No. It's I need something that's. I don't need something, but I'd prefer something with the level of polish that Pixelborn had, especially with the ladder, the internal systems, like outside of the UI and the animation, which is great, and the rules, consistency, and integrity. The ladder system, the ELO system, I really liked that. I really enjoyed it.
Building. This weekend, I tried to hop back onto Pixelborn Connect, and I played like 3 games. And I mean, we've already talked about this. I think what he has there is great, but it's such a is it such a casual option now. And it's nice that people have the option to just, like they can play. They can basically queue a game of Lorcana whenever they want. But like, there is no ranking system on that at all. And some of the decks I'm playing against and some of the stuff, it's just like, what? This, like, it was to the point where I just didn't really find it a very fun experience. And like, I've used it before and I think it's a great tool, but it's just not what it was in terms of the ranking system and stuff like that. And Moyen, I know you haven't really used it that much either, but from what you have used of it, I think you agree, right? Like, it's nowhere near what the high level old school Pixelborn stuff was like. I don't know, it reminded me of like back in the day Hearthstone Legend kind of grinders, and like people would be like, at the end of the season you'd want to see who'd finish at the top as the days go closer, and everyone's streaming their perspectives and stuff like that. Like, that's just, I don't know.
Remember tournaments? Oh, remember the tournaments?
Oh yeah. Oh man.
It's like
the tournaments were our biggest downfall.
Yeah, I know.
Probably.
I know. But that was an era, right? So I would not stream the tournaments. I'd be popping between the streams. Like, I'd be watching Savige play around. He'd finish. I could pop over to Moyen's stream, see how he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was God, that feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
Isn't it crazy that we've actually like experienced? Like, it feels weird now at this stage that we've experienced what that was like, and it's gonna be so long until we ever experience something like that again. It's so weird to me.
Unless Pavel. Relaunch.
Bro, you're trying to get. Oh my god.
I mean, yes. I'm not saying that you could convince him, but if you wanted to, shoot him a message, write a YouTube comment, maybe encourage him a bit.
No, don't peer pressure him.
Don't peer pressure him. Do not
Why
do
not?
this. Oh
Why
my
not?
god.
Come on.
Brendan's gonna slip Pavel a 50. Bro, could you just turn the client back on? Thank you. Yeah.
Dude, I'm literally looking at Savige's Twitter right now. June 7, 2024. He retweets Mr. Jan Moy back on rank 1 Ruby Sapphire.
Oh, what a
list.
time, bro. What a time to be
Oh,
alive.
look at that. There's a fucking Bell in here. I remember when I messaged
the
messaged
Bell.
him and I was like, hey, bro, what if we put Bell in this? He was like, you're a fucking idiot.
Well, usually I say that and then I don't test it. But it was, okay, you're an idiot, but I'll try.
Yeah. And what's
And I am an idiot, confirmed. So it's okay.
what's so wild about those times as well is because all of those competitive tournaments were at a time where there was no set championships. Like, you remember how hyped the first set championships were? But I think a lot of that hype was generated because the engine was available for us to utilize and to play as well. Of course, there would have been hype anyways, but it's how much practice people could put in and how much testing you could do. Like, I don't know, part of me misses watching tournaments of like set 2 because there just weren't really, like, there was no real competitive scene physically of that. But we had that, the community had it.
Even with all that practice, set champs were just free.
Yeah, and it's I will always remember when I walked up to set champs. Last few days I've been jamming how far I'll go red blue on rank 1 all the time. The evening before the set champs, we put up the video on how far I go. Round 1, I faced my own deck.
Oh no. Good times.
Oh, I feel like a nostalgic boomer right now. Oh my god.
And we're still like in the first year, and somehow we've already been in an era that maybe some people will never experience.
Yeah, all the new players coming into Lorcana, you don't know what it was like back in our day. Yeah.
I think I've said everything I need to say. I'll see you all in a couple months.
Yeah, Brennan won't be back
Next
until
week.
2026, everybody. Yeah. All right. So that's it. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching this episode of the podcast. It's great to be back. Once again, apologies for a little break. I think it was good for all of us, though. Moyen was on a bit of a vacation. I took some time off. Brennan was just getting sick as usual, unfortunately. You've had the worst luck, mate. Like, it's funny because everyone, like, nobody notices for our episodes as well. There's some weeks where Brennan's like, I'm prepped. We've organized the time. This has happened a few times now where Brendan messages me like 30 minutes before saying, I'm literally dying. Like, I cannot move,
Or like someone literally just died outside my office.
Someone
and I
got
cannot
shot
leave.
outside, yeah.
I cannot leave my office. Like, there's police tape and yeah. Good times.
But what I can tell you, Brendan, is every week we've been gone, the comments have been full of people missing you. So
yeah, shout out to everybody who didn't come up to me and no, it was I was like, dude, when I went to the bathroom, I was like, oh, because I appreciate everybody who asked about where the podcast and where I've been, but that's a hard question to answer 150 times.
Yeah.
I didn't have an answer, to be honest, but yeah, I think that Podcana has something good, and I think that it should continue. Even, it depends. We'll see.
Yeah, I think Podcana will be around for a long time, no matter what. So, yeah. Awesome. All right, thank you everybody so much for watching. If you like this podcast, number one thing you can do is leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your local podcast platform. There's a video version of this available over at youtube.com/@Podcana podcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. Twitters are @Moyen_HS, @Kawatek_CG, and @Karsten_Frank. Thanks, Brendan. See you guys in the next one.